Welcome back to another Python programming video. In this video, we are going to talk about tuples in Python programming. Before we get into the video, let's first answer the question, what are tuples? So basically, a tuple is a collection of Python objects separated by commas inside a parenthesis. In terms of indexing, nested objects, and repetition, tuple and list is similar. The main difference between them is lists are mutable, whereas tuples are immutable. First, let's have an example. Let's say we have tuple 1, tuple 2, and tuple 3 as our variable names. In our first variable, we have apple, banana, and cherry, and closed by a parenthesis. In our second tuple, we have an open and closed parenthesis without nothing on it. And the last one, in tuple 3, we have 50. So now we're going to print the tuple 1, the tuple 2, and the tuple 3. So the output must be like this. The first tuple must print the apple, the banana, and cherry. Next tuple must print the open and closed parenthesis, and the last one must print also the number 50. Now let's talk about accessing values in Python. In accessing values in tuple, the square brackets must be used for slicing along with the index or indices to obtain the value available at that index. Let's have an example. In our tuple 1, we have physics, chemistry, 1997, and 2000. In our tuple 2, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Now we're going to print the tuple 1 with a 0 inside the bracket, and we're going to print the tuple 2 with 1 and 5 inside the bracket. The output should be like this. In our tuple 1, with 0 inside the brackets, we have physics because physics is the first element in the tuple. Now, we have tuple 2 wherein there is 1 and 5 inside the bracket. As you can see, we have 2, 3, 4, and 5. So notice that the program printed the second one or the second element up to the fifth element. So now, let's talk about updating tuples. So like what I've mentioned earlier, tuples are immutable, meaning to say the values of the tuple is not possible to be updated or changed. Taking portions of the existing tuples to create new tuples are possible. So let's have an example. So we have for our tuple 1, we have 12 and 34.56. And for our tuple 2, we have a string ABC and another string XYZ. Now we're going to print tup1 plus tup2. And the output must be like this. The program must print or must display 12, 34.56, string ABC, and string XYZ. Now, let's talk about deleting tuple elements. So removing individual tuple elements is not possible. However, putting together another tuple with the undesired elements discarded is acceptable. Using a del statement will explicitly remove an entire tuple. So let's have an example. So let's say our variable name is tup or tup, and it contains physics, chemistry, 1997, and 2000. Next, we're going to print the tup, and after printing the tup, we're going to use the del statement, del tup. Then after the dot statement, we're going to print after deleting tup, and we're going to print again the tup. If you run this program, you can see the value of tup before we use or before we coded the del statement. And right after the del statement, you can see an error containing the there is no existing TUP or tuple. So now let's talk about the basic tuple elements. So tuples respond to the plus and multiplication operators much like strings. They mean concatenation and repetition here too, except that the result is a new tuple, not a string. So the first table are the Python expressions, next are the results, and the last one are the descriptions. In the first one, we have len 1, 2, and 3. So the result must be 3, and the description is length. So using a len will only count the elements inside the tuple, so the result is 3. Next, let's say we're going to add 1, 2, and 3 plus 4, 5, and 6. The result must be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and its description is concatenation. Next, we have the string or the tuple high, and it is multiplied by 4. The result must print a tuple containing 4 high, and it is an example of repetition. For the fourth one, we have 3 in 1, 2, and 3. And the result is true, meaning you can find 3 inside the tuple. And it is an example of membership. And for the last one, we have 4x in range, tuple 1, 2, 3, then print x and is equal to quotation marks. And the result must be 1, 2, and 3. So notice that this is an example of an iteration. Now let's talk about indexing, slicing, and matrices. Since tuples are sequences, indexing and slicing work the same way for tuples as they do for strings, assuming the following input. So T is equal to a string C++, Java, and a Python. Remember this tuple because we're going to use it as an example. So let's say our Python expression is like this, T and a 2 inside the bracket. And the result must be Python because Python is the third element inside the tuple that I've shown earlier. And the description says that offsets start at 0. So like the string, the elements start from the number 0 and so on. Let's say we input T and a -2 inside the bracket. The result must be Java, since negative is equal to count from the right. So we're going to start from Python, then -2, which is Java, so that's why the result is Java. And the last one, we have T, and inside the bracket we have 1 and a colon. So the result must be Java and Python. So in the description, it means that slicing fetches sections. Like in string, if you input like that, it will start from 1 or the second element in the list or on a string. Also in a tuple, it will start on the second element up to the last element. So in our case, Java is the second element and Python is the last element. Now, what about no enclosing delimiters? So no closing delimiters is any set of multiple objects, comma separated, written without identifying symbols, in example, brackets for lists, parentheses for tuples, etc. So let's have an example. Let's say we're going to print the string ABC, comma, -4.24e93, 18 plus 6.6j, and a string xyz. Then x and y is equal to 1 and 2. Then we're going to print value of x, y, colon, and xy. So the output must be like this: ABC minus 4.24e plus 93, then 18 plus 6.6j, and xyz. value of x and y is 1 and 2. And for the last topic, we're going to talk about the built-in tuple functions. A number of built-in functions create or process tuples. So here's a table. We have a function and description. For the first one, the CMP and a tuple containing tuple 1 and tuple 2, while the description is it compares the elements of both tuples. Next, the len tuple, it gives the total length of the tuple, just like on strings or list. Next, we have max tuple, which returns the item from the tuple with max value. Next, we have min tuple. It returns the item from the tuple with minimum value. And the last one, tuple and sec, it converts a list into a tuple. So let's have an example. Let's say our tuple is 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So if we use the len, it will return 5. In max, if we use again the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tuple, it will return 5. And for minimum, it will return 1. And for the tuple, let's say we have a list 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 inside the bracket, and the variable name of that list is sec, let's say like that. Then if we type or program tuple sec, it should convert the list into a tuple. And that's all for tuples in Python programming. Before we end this video, we would like to thank the following resources who made this video possible.